leaders, teachers and trainers, professors and professionals, those who belong to the field of literature, especially English literature, the most honorable present Prime Minister, Sri Dr. Narendra Modi ji, presence of doctors and ministers, respected fathers and mothers, affectionate sons and daughters. I, Dr.RKS from USA, heartily, cordially welcome all of you. Your presence is praiseworthy, admirable, appreciable. Dear friends, today we will go through the glimpse of English literature. Why are the city magnates successful? Answer on the basis of the essay Third Thoughts. शहर के धनवान व्यक्ति सफल क्यों हैं? निबंध थर्ड थॉट्स के आधार पर उत्तर देना है. Author's friend tells that the city magnates are successful because they don't do impulsive things. The friend says that all the rich don't think about giving their profits to the persons who are responsible for their profits. He further says that the impulse is the negation of magnetism. That is to say that a sentimental person can never be materially prosperous. If one wants to be materialistic, he will have to ignore his impulses. In the world of business, an impulsive person cannot make his position. Friend thinks that if he wants to be a successful art speculator, he will have to avoid such behavior and control his impulses. Sentiments are the obstacles in the way of material prosperity. So he should be rather practical than sentimental in his dealings. Write a note on the appropriateness of the title of the essay Third Thoughts. The title Third Thoughts is very appropriate. The phrase Third Thoughts is a humorous coinage by E.V. Lucas from the base Second Thoughts, meaning opinion or resolve, formed after the considerations. So third thoughts is used in the sense of opinion or resolve formed after repeated reconsiderations. The phrase is an appropriate title for the essay which describes how a man changed his decision about a certain matter every time he thought about it. The title beautifully expresses the central theme of the essay, which in the author's words is, by what incredible means I found a purchaser for the drawing at £50. There is no need to tell, for the point of this narrative resides not in bargaining with collectors, but in bargaining with my own soul. The author beautifully places the stages through which the mind of the hero of the third thoughts passed before declaring the incident is closed. Write in brief the subject matter of the essay on the pleasures of no longer being very young. This essay has been taken from All Is Girls. The book was published quite late in 1931. The essay is in plea for the calm consideration of traditional wisdom. The knowledge that has been handed down to us from generation to generation is often dismissed by impatient, idealistic young men of modern times mere mere superstitions. They think that our ancestors lived a miserable life because they had not the benefit of modern progress. But G.K. Chesterton points out that this modern progress is not an unmixed blessing. When it breaks down, it entails widespread misery. He believes that youth knows only one part of life, but old age knows life in its entirety. Old people can compare, contrast, and realize how the enduring truths of life have ever been the same. Why is it impossible to convey in words the true advantages of old age? Illustrate in details the advantages and pleasures of no longer being very young are presented in G.K. Chesterton's essay on the pleasures of no longer being very young. The advantages of old age cannot exactly be told in words unless one reaches that stage. He cannot understand the real advantages of that age. The author wants to say that the advantages of the old age are to be felt only. They are not the things to be told in words. The old age is like a change of view. In our young age, we see the things as only a diagram. But in old age, those very things appear before us as solids. Author illustrates the Egyptian inscription which shows the stone snakes and birds. The stone snakes and birds seem to us as stable in our young age, but they begin to leap about like living creatures in our old age. Author wants to say that the real advantages of the advancement of the age lies in seeing life in the inanimate things of the world. The pleasures of old age can be felt by a person only when he gets that age. The exact experience of the advantages of the old age can be had only by getting the age and not through words. That is why the author says that it is quite impossible to convey the advantages of the world in the words to anybody who has not reached it. Discuss briefly Chesterton's ideas that the aged have better sense of realizing the new words on the pleasures on no longer being very young. Chesterton says that it is one of the artistic advantages of the aged that they do see the new things relieved New things relieved sharply against a background which they had experienced. To the young, the new things are often themselves the background. The modern do not realize modernity. It seems as though they had stepped onto a moving platform which they hardly know to be moving, as a man cannot feel the daily movement of the earth, but he would feel it sharp enough if the earth moved the other way. That is, if anything unusual takes place. The older generation will not get startled, particularly those who remember a time when the earth moved the other way. They have the experience at their command. So the new world that is changing its course does not upset the old generation. What are the pleasures of old age as described by Chesterton in his essay? One of the most important advantages of old age lies in discovering that traditions are true and therefore alive. It is in old age that we begin to see significance in a large number of traditions, institutions, maxims, and codes of manners that seem to be dead to younger people. It is when we are old that we are able to realize changes in modern times. The modern the moderns do not realize modernity. They, they have never known anything else. The older people do not these things, these changes. They do feel sharply and clearly the epoch which is beginning, for they were there before it began. Chesterton says it is one of the artistic advantages of the age that they do see the new things relieved sharply against a background, their shape definite and distinct. To the young, these new things are often themselves the background and are hardly seen at all. Old people are conscious of their defects. They know them better than young people. They know the defects of youth also, for they have been themselves young. One pleasure attacked, one, one pleasure attached to growing older is that many things seem to be growing younger, growing fresher and more lively than we once supposed them to be. What is the subject matter of Gardiner's essay on superstitions? In this essay, A.Z. Gardiner attempts to discuss the origin of superstitions. He takes up ancient and modern superstitions for his study and concludes that all superstitions spring from human fear. We often feel an anxiety regarding our future. We always have some fear and doubt what is going to happen to us, particularly when we are not in a position to improve things. Thus, human helplessness and human fear produce superstitious ideas in our minds. Gardiner refers to some of the common superstitions, beliefs, and points out that with the advancement of science and increase in our knowledge about nature, our beliefs now appear baseless. Gardiner is of the opinion that superstitions are the product of our ignorance. In olden days, when science had not revealed the mysteries of nature, people thought that mysterious powers ruled the world. In modern days of scientific knowledge and rational attitude, there is no place for superstitions. Why does A.Z. Gardiner say that modern generation is fortunate in regard to superstitions? It is observed that the increase of scientific knowledge does reduce superstition and also baseless guessing about unproved things. A.Z. Gardiner feels that modern generation is fortunate to have born in the age of science. Now we know much about nature and natural upheavals like earthquakes or floods or such other calamities, which the older generations used to attribute to some supernatural powers, although we still know very little about God. We still know very little about God, and our knowledge in this regard is similar to that of our ancestors. But we are not in dark about nature and its aspects. At least we are free from superstitions associated with the calamities in nature. We do not have faith in animals' divine power, nor we postpone our important programs and activities an account of some presumed ill omen. Superstitions now being to a creed out one because science has revealed the secrets of nature and its course. What did man think about nature and its events in ancient period? In olden days, man knew nothing about the mysteries of nature. Man thought he was merely a plaything in the hands of powerful and terrible forces of nature. It was natural that man developed many superstitious beliefs and tried to find ways to save himself from calamities. Man was carried away by floods, drowned in waters, burned down by fire, and killed by disease. He saw lightning and heard the roar of thunder. Man thought that it was experience of God's anger for him because he did not know the physical reasons of these things. He did not understand as to why people fell ill and then died. He came to the conclusion that it was a punishment for his wrongdoings. He believed that the powers which rule the world are both kind and cruel. He did not know why these powers were sometimes helping and at other times destructive. He thought that everything in the universe was related to his fate. The ruling powers expressed their wrath or pleasure through thunders or flight of birds. How would the Romans and the Greeks regard omens? In ancient days, Roman and Greek people very much believed in superstitions and omens. Superstitions are irrational beliefs. Was a learned philosopher and an orator. Cicero lost his life by trusting to the wisdom of crows. When he was in flight from Antony and Caesar Augustus, he put to sea and might have escaped. But some crows chanced to circle around his vessel, and he took the circumstance to be unfavorable to his action. Returned to shore, and he was murdered. When Pompey was afraid that the Romans would elect Cato as praetor, he shouted to the assembly that he heard thunder and got the whole election postponed, for the Romans would never transfer business after it had thundered. Alexander was always surrounded by fortune tellers, just as a modern ruler is surrounded by his ministers. Caesar was a great Roman emperor, but he was a superstitious man. He consulted soothsayers and fortune tellers. He took decision after reading his fate in omens. What does Aldous Huxley say about art snobbery? Aldous Huxley relates certain snobberies prevalent in human society. Regarding art snobbery, he says that most of us are victims of such mania. He explains that there are two types of art snobbery, broadly thought of as the Platonic and the unplatonic art snobbery. He contends that Platonic art snobs merely take an interest in art, that it is affected taste in art and artists. Talking about them but not going in for the possession of the pieces of art. In belief, it is kind of love which does not lead to practical action. On the other hand, unplatonic art snobs are those people who do not pretend to be art lovers, but also try to cut a figure as large-hearted patrons of art by buying art pieces. Huxley contends that Platonic art snobbery is a branch of culture snobbery. Unplatonic art snobbery is a hybrid or music or mule, for it is simultaneously a subspecies of culture snobbery and of possession snobbery. What is importance of snobbery is, what does snobbery do in a society? Snobbery creates and promotes activity in society. It urges the people to do something. A society with a great number of snobs is a very busy society. It cannot remain passive. Huxley says that a society with a great number of snobs and snobberies is like a dog having plenty of fleas. It does not and cannot remain passive. The followers of various snobberies take it as their duty to make unending and continuous efforts in the direction of their respective snobberies. The snobs make great sacrifices for the purpose. The society snob, for example, is always busy seeking the company of distinguished persons. The modernity snob is always busy trying to be up to date. How does social other snobberies mention the evils of the society infected with social snobbery? Society snobbery leads us social snobbery leads us to complicated situations. The tendency of hero worship is being increased, as a result of which modernity as well as culture snobbery is nurtured in society. It is painful to observe that culture snobbery is approved by professional intellectual, while the industrialists prefer possession snobbery. Any society that is gripped in varied snobberies, whether it is health snobbery or industry or art or culture snobbery. Such society is like a dog with plenty of fleas. That is, it is a diseased society, just as a dog just as a dog with just as a dog with fleas suffer from filthy disease but still remain alive, the society with plenty of snobbery suffers from detestable disease, and to keep it alive there are lots of social snobs who maintain their taste even if they are subjected to a series of sacrifice. The society snobs always search for heroes or heroines to worship and to follow. They seek to be the most modern all the way, but on the surface itself it is all vanity. Huxley's advice can be seen in his expressions that one should not boast of diseases like consumption or take pride in hard drinks or show prosperity in possessing artistic things of latest designs or cultivate hero worship, because such tendencies are unwanted activities in human society. What is culture snobbery? The culture snobs are those persons who have love to old traditions, customs, and artistic things. Unplatonic art snobs are the snobs of culture also. They believe in possession snobbery also. Those who collect works of art do so because they think that work of art are culture symbols. Possession of culture symbol is a mark of social prestige. Culture symbols are also symbols of wealth. One who has a large collection of works of art is considered a wealthy person as well as a culture snob. A large collection of works of art is a very effective symbol of wealth. Illustrate the metaphor, it is by ignorance alone that we advance through the rough seas of this our mortal life. Hilaire Belloc writes in a delightful and noble manner about ignorance, which he thinks is not mean. He says that in many cases, ignorance is a bliss and adds to our joys of life. Ignorance has the power to flood the mind with happiness. Ignorance brings spiritual beatitude. According to the writer, all our heroes loves hero worship dramas our hopes of peace in future, and our vision of fortune and the fruits of ignorance. Often we are happy only because we do not know how others are thinking about us. We think that they are friendly to us and they have love and respect for us, but in fact they are only tolerating us and they have numerous grudges against us. In the heart of their hearts, they might be ridiculing us. Thus, according to H. Hilaire Belloc, ignorance is a bliss. In Hilaire Belloc's words, it is by ignorance alone that we advance through the rough seas of this our mortal life. Were not man ignorant of that? Were not men ignorant of what lay before them? No one would face the adventure. What is Hilaire Belloc's attitude towards of examining in praise of ignorance? Illustrate the metaphor. It is by ignorance alone that the advance through the rough seas of the rough seas of this our mortal life. Hilaire Belloc writes in a delightful and noble manner about ignorance, which he thinks is not mean. He says that in many cases, ignorance is a bliss and adds to our joys of life. Ignorance has the power to flood the mind with happiness. Ignorance brings spiritual beatitude according to the right loves, hero worship, dramas, our hopes of peace in nature, future, and our vision of fortune are the fruits of ignorance. Often we are happy only because we do not know how others are thinking about us. We think that they are friendly to us and they have love and respect, are only tolerating us and they have numerous grudges against us. In the heart of their hearts, they might be ridiculing us. Thus, according to Hilaire Belloc, ignorance is a bliss. The rough seas of this, our mortal life, were not men ignorant of what lay before them. No one would face the adventure. What is Hilaire Belloc's attitude towards the modern system of examination? Commenting over the modern system of examination, Hilaire Belloc contends that it has been justly blamed by the wisest and the best because it has taken the shape of a trick. He says anyone who has sat for an examination has had a vivid revelation of his own ignorance. He relates his own experience that he has written answer to perhaps 100 examination papers in his time, and his attitude towards each of them was that he felt one of violent bewilderment, loss of foothold, sinking into the abyss. In the examination hall, he was surrounded by such several other victims. Each had his little desk and an underpaid invigilator glaring at them from a platform above. He tells about his failures in attempting answers to the questions with vague ideas in his mind. Below disapproves such system wherein the student attempts the question only under compulsion and not willingly or wholeheartedly. He gives the example of the examination for the student of divinity who has ample choice to answer the required questions out of a number of them. Belloc is critical about such attitude in examinations. What are the reasons that we fail to put our good resolution into practice? Man is a slave of habit. Some of us take good resolutions every year but fail to put them into practice. We do not fulfill the good resolutions we take. It is because we are claimed by our old habits. The pressure of our ingrained habits and shortcomings is so heavy that we find ourselves unable to act according to our good resolutions. There are some who are so strong-willed that once they decided to do something, they carry out their resolutions most faithful. Line says that such men also act according to their habits. They are masters of their will. Robert Line says that as the new year comes, we can take good resolution with the honest desire to fulfill them and thus achieve perfect life. But in reality, we cannot do anything better than our past actions. It is so because all of us are slaves of our habits. We very much desire to see that we fulfill our resolutions, but in most cases we fail to do that. It is because we lack a strong willpower. Write a short note on Robert Lyne's prose style with reference to his essay titled On Good Resolution. Foster's essay on good resolution is a fine example of Robert Lyne's prose style and manner of writing. In this essay, he appears to be supporting the makers of resolutions, but in fact, he is ridiculing human tendency of making good resolutions and breaking them regularly. He calls action a vulgarized good resolution. This is a subtle style. Another very ironical statement of Lyne is that resolutions give us wonderful comfort because they are concerned with the next week or month, not with the present, and the next week or month never practically comes. The essay writer does not support this and reject that. Instead, he hints at the follies and foibles of human beings with good humor. He makes his readers laugh, and sometimes he makes himself an object of laughter and ridicule. Lyne sees no harm in taking good resolutions, even if they are unto fulfilled. What does Priestley say about his problems in his beginning part of the essay on getting off to sleep? In this essay, the author J.B. Priestley writes about his problem of insomnia. It is difficult for him to fall to sleep soon after getting into his bed, as some people are known to do. The author discusses many methods of getting sleep described by various persons, but finds all of them ineffectively. At night, the author can do anything except sleeping. All night, he can keep on writing essays, fascinating subjects, and noble ideas with their appropriate imagery and expression come hastily in his mind. He can create half a dozen imperishable masterpieces. While spending a restless hour in bed, he can solve all doubts of humanity. When he is in mood of humor, he can compose and grant symphonies and paint magnificent pictures. At night, he is at once Shakespeare, Beethoven, and Michelangelo. Yet it gives him no satisfaction. For the one thing the author cannot do is to go to sleep. He writes, if it is true that our thoughts and mental images are perfectly tangible things like our books and pictures to the inhabitants of the next world, then I am making for myself a better reputation, for then I am there, then I am in this place. Give me a restless hour or two in bed, and I cannot solve to my own satisfaction all the doubts of humanity. When I am in humor, I can compose grand symphonies and paint magnificent pictures. I am at once Shakespeare, Beethoven, and Michelangelo. Yet it gives me no satisfaction. For one thing I cannot do it. For one thing I cannot do is to go to sleep. Give a brief character sketch of widow Vaishali. Widow Vaishali was once the queen of beauty, that is the most beautiful lady, but she was leading a complete solidarity life for last some time. But she loses her charm and attraction because of her unfair sexual activities and shameful, scandalous, hateful activities. These things made the gentlemen and well-mannered persons of the city against her. Those days, each of three gentlemen, Mr. Medbourne, Colonel Killigrew, and Mr. Gascoigne, were lovers of Lady Wycherley, and once they were ready to cut down one another's neck. One doctor, when Dr. Hidgers gave those four old persons the water of youth, they became young surprisingly. They began to behave madly. When Colonel praised the beauty of widow Wycherley, she ran to mirror to see her face. The three old gentlemen who had become young out of the effect of the water of youth began to quarrel to possess widow Wycherley. The widow Wycherley, with a mischievous merriment, went to the extent of asking Dr. Hidger to dance with her. Dr. Hidger resented this unruly behavior of his guest. The girl widow Wycherley was almost inflamed to madness. She flirted, but neither she did grant to nor did she withhold her fervor from the three guests. It made them to interchange threatening looks. Thus she was inciting her three lovers to quarrel fiercely among themselves. Describe the effect of a wonderful liquid upon old persons. Three old gentlemen and old widow Lady Wycherley became young and vigorous on once again after drinking the water of fountain of youth. They became young and energetic. Their cheeks grew rosy and their eyes became bright and clear. Their grey hair turned deep black, but soon they started behaving irresponsibly like wanton people. Their vigorous youth made them overexcited. They laughed loudly at their old-fashioned garments. The girl, widow Wycherley, was almost inflamed to madness. She flirted, but neither she did grant to nor did she withhold her fervor from the three guests. It made them to interchange threatening looks. They grappled fiercely to each other's throats. Write a short note on the character of Dr. Hidgers. Dr. Hidger is a very peculiar and unique old gentleman. He has a good knowledge of human nature, and now that it is full of weaknesses which is beyond correction. Dr. Hidger's study room is an expression of his love for antique things. He is a romantic man. His experiment to revive youth is an exposition of his romantic man. His experiment to revive youth is an exposition of his romantic nature. He has firm faith in his beliefs. Dr. Hidger possesses the knowledge about the water of the fountain of youth. He has the knowledge of this right place and tells that the fountain of youth is in the southern part of Floridian Peninsula. What message does the writer want to give through the story, The Gift of Maggie? The writer wants to say that gifts have their intrinsic value, whatever their nominal value may be. There are tokens of mutual and keep the intensity of love alive. These days, gifts or presents are given generally to achieve some selfish end. Such gifts are only artificial and showy and are light imbued in real life, in real love. In old times, it was otherwise. When Jim and Delia present their gifts to each other, they realize their mistakes, but their affection for each other is not diminished. It shows that they fully know the real purpose of giving presents. Bring out the note of pathos in the story The Gift of Maggie. We can notice very clearly the pathetic note in story, the poor condition of the couple. The poor condition of the couple, and in this poverty, strong desire of giving the presents to each other expresses the pathos in the story. A pathetic scene comes before us when we find that each of them sacrifice their dearest possessions to purchase gifts for each other. These gifts too become useless as they did not then possess the things for which those costly gifts were bought. Thus, The Gifts of the Maggie is a moral story. It has a didactic note which teaches us about what a true conjugal love is. The story is based on the custom of giving presents on the Christmas day. The story inspires men and women to live as husband and wife as Jim and Ella had lived. The elements of sacrifice and pathos are very strong in the story. Discuss the significance of the title of the story, The Gift of Maggie. Jim and Ella are very poor but want to give a nice and precious Christmas gift to each other. So each of them sells his or her most valuable possessions to buy a Christmas gift for each other. Delia sells her most valuable long hair to buy a platinum chain for the gold watch of her husband. Likewise, Jim sells a watch to buy a beautiful costly set of combs of tortoise shells for her long hair to give her as a Christmas gift. But these gifts are useless for each other because they had already sold their priceless possessions to buy suitable and costly gifts for each other. The title of the story, The Gift, has a reference to the story of the three wise men of the East who bring nice presents for the baby Christ. who cannot use those gifts. These gifts were very costly and valuable. The Christmas gifts brought by Jim and Ella were also very valuable, but the gifts were useless for each other as they had already lost the possessions for which the one purchased a gift for the other, but the gifts signified their deep and true love. So the title of the story is quite appropriate. What is the subject matter of the story? The gift of the Maggie. The gift of the Maggie is a simple and moving story of a deep love which the young couple Jim and Delia bear for each other. They are very poor but want to give a nice and precious Christmas gift to each other. So each of them sells his or her most valuable possessions to buy a Christmas gift to each other. Della sells her most valuable long hair to buy a platinum chain for the gold watch of her husband. Likewise, Jim sells for her long hair to give her as a Christmas gift. But these gifts are useless for each other because they had already sold their priceless possessions to buy suitable and costly gifts for each other. Discuss the subject matter of the story. A Rose for Emily. One of the most frequently anthologized stories by Faulkner, A Rose of Emily, is a remarkable story of Emily Grierson, an aging spinster in Jefferson whose death and funeral drew the attention of the entire town. The man, through a sort of respectful affection for a fallen monument, the woman, mostly out of the curiosity to see the inside of her house, which no one save an old man servant, combined gardener and cook had seen in at rest 10 years. The unnamed narrator, which some critics have identified as the town or at least a representative of voice from it, in a seemingly haphazard manner, related key moments in Emily's life, including the death of her father, a brief fling with a Yankee road paver, Homer Barron. Beyond the literal level of Emily's narrative, the story is sometimes regarded as symbolic of the changes in the South during the representative period. A Rose for Emily may be considered a tragic love story in the naturalistic mode, a detective story, a thriller, and a typical O. Henry story with surprise endings. What kind of behavior did Miss Emily show on the death of her father? Emily was Mr. Grierson's only daughter. He thought that his family was a great one. He did not consider any young man of the town suitable as a husband for her daughter. At last he died, leaving his daughter unmarried. Miss Emily's lover also deserted her. Miss Emily's woman life was thus spoiled by her father, a man, and her lover, a man. She had also inherited her father's virulence. She could not think that her father could die, so she showed no sign of grief on her face. The ladies of the neighborhood came to her. She told them that her father was dead. Many important people of the town also came. They tried to make her understand the reality. 3 days passed. She told everybody that her father was not dead. The people thought of calling the police and forcibly take the dead body for the last rites. Ultimately, Emily had a change of mind. She broke down and realized that the death had really come to her father. Her behavior did not show much sign that Miss Emily had gone crazy. Thank you, listeners and learners, those who are listening. from the field of English literature, they must go through these parts of listening, the words and thoughts, ideas that are presented for presenting in the examination. Thank you, listeners and learners of English literature. May God bless you. Thank you.